The US president has said that this additional 10% tariff will take effect on the 1st of February.
What if Venezuela was never the real target? What if this entire crisis was bait? Because while headlines celebrate a bold move, a much bigger game has been unfolding behind the scenes. In 2023, China quietly elevated Venezuela to its highest strategic tier. Russia poured in over $10 billion. Oil flowed east, influence shifted south. And while Washington was distracted, the clock kept ticking toward 2027. Fast forward to January 3rd, special forces move in, Maduro is pulled out, and suddenly years of Russian and Chinese positioning collapse overnight. Sounds like a win, right? Not so fast. Because every move in Venezuela pulls US attention, troops, and resources away from the Pacific, right when China is preparing its most decisive play. This isn't just about Latin America, it's about global power, timing, and a trap that's already closing. If you want analysis beyond headlines, hit subscribe. This is where the real story starts. The bait was always Venezuela. In 2023, Xi Jinping upgraded Venezuela to an all-weather strategic partnership, the highest level China offers. That label wasn't symbolic, it was deliberate. This wasn't just about trade. Russia had already pumped more than $10 billion into keeping the Maduro government alive. Not for oil. Russia has more crude than it can sell. The real value was psychological, showing Moscow could project power 6,000 miles away, right in America's backyard. China played a quieter but deeper game. Loans, infrastructure, satellites. 2 Chinese tracking stations were built inside Venezuela. Nearly 95% of Venezuelan oil exports flowed to Beijing. Yet that oil made up only about 4% of China's total imports. That's the point most analysts miss. Oil wasn't the prize. Venezuela was. It was proof that the Monroe Doctrine no longer mattered, and that the Americas were no longer exclusively American. For years it worked. Washington was distracted, wars in the Middle East, endless commitments abroad, while Russia and China tightened control. Then Trump came back. January 3rd. The trap closes. Just after 10 a.m., the operation began. Navy SEALs, CIA assets, and special forces moved in to extract Maduro from his compound. Then came the detail that changes everything. Chinese officials had met Maduro only hours before the strike. That wasn't coincidence. It was a calculated blindside. Pentagon estimates showed more than $10 billion in Chinese loans tied up in Venezuela, suddenly at risk. Infrastructure projects, satellite facilities, years of positioning in America's backyard, wiped out overnight. Russian advisors pulled out. Iranian intelligence networks shut down. North Korean liaison teams removed. From Beijing and Moscow's perspective, a mission meant to last for years collapsed in a single day. So was it an American win? On paper, yes. Strategically, that's exactly where the trap begins to reveal itself. The hidden calendar. 2027. While Trump was pulling Maduro out of Venezuela, a far more dangerous clock was ticking in the Pacific, and Beijing was watching every second. U.S. intelligence assessments are clear. Xi Jinping has ordered the People's Liberation Army to be ready for a strategic, decisive victory over Taiwan by 2027. This isn't speculation. It's a conclusion repeated year after year in Pentagon reports. That's just 18 months away. China's military buildup is shaped around that deadline. Constant amphibious drills, systems designed to counter U.S. air defenses, hypersonic weapons, expanded nuclear forces, and AI-driven warfare. Xi has been preparing for this moment since taking power. And that's where Venezuela becomes the perfect distraction. The overstretch equation, Pentagon reports say it plainly, the U.S. military is stretched thin. Indo-Pacific Command already holds around 60% of America's naval and air power. Surveillance missions near China have doubled since 2009. Large joint exercises are up by 50%. Yet, despite record defense budgets, the number of ships and aircraft hasn't grown much. More missions, same hardware, constant pressure. Inside the Pentagon, analysts have a blunt term for it. Exhaustive scrambling. Not control, not dominance, just constant reaction. Now add Venezuela to the mix. Trump put it clearly, We're going to have presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil. We're not afraid of boots on the ground. Boots on the ground in a country filled with armed gangs, a military still tied to Maduro, and public anger toward U.S. involvement. This is how missions expand. Remove a leader, secure oil, fight cartels. What begins as a limited move starts to spiral. Every troop in Venezuela is one less in the Pacific. Every dollar there is one not spent preparing for Taiwan. And China is watching the clock. This is what truly worries strategists. China doesn't need the US to fight over Taiwan. It only needs America distracted long enough for Taiwan to start doubting it will be defended. If the US gets tied down in Venezuela, managing oil, confronting cartels, holding ground, the deterrence against China doesn't disappear overnight. It weakens slowly. American credibility erodes. And Taiwan begins asking the dangerous question, will the US really step in if China moves? Or will it be too stretched, too committed, too exhausted? This isn't speculation. Pentagon analysts have warned clearly that a serious, long-term US military effort in Venezuela or elsewhere in Latin America would pull resources and focus away from Asia, draining attention and undermining deterrence against China. Put simply, Venezuela becomes the trap. Putin tested this logic years ago, suggesting the US handle the Americas while Russia focused on Eastern Europe. It didn't work under Biden. But Trump's version of America first is different. And that difference is exactly what Moscow and Beijing were counting on. Was it intentional? Here's the reality. Whether Putin and Xi planned this from the beginning or simply benefited as their Venezuela strategy collapsed, the result is the same. Russia and China failed to save Maduro, but they succeeded in pulling Trump into a dilemma where the easiest political choice, staying in Venezuela, carries the highest strategic cost. A rapid U.S. withdrawal would signal weakness to rivals Washington is trying to deter in the Pacific. Trump is now boxed in. Venezuela has become both a display of American power and a burden limiting America's ability to respond to far larger threats elsewhere. The real story. Nobody's talking about the media is stuck debating legality, international rules, and whether Maduro got due process. Those issues matter, but they're not the point. The real story is that two authoritarian powers spent decades building influence inside America's own hemisphere, not to keep it forever, but to complicate U.S. strategy at the worst possible moment. China needs America distracted away from the Pacific, and that window closes in 2027. Whether Trump recognizes it or not, he's now facing two enormous challenges at once: reasserting control in the Western Hemisphere while preparing for the most serious great power confrontation since World War II. He has one military, limited resources, and a Pacific deadline that won't move. That's not a win, that's a trap. And in 18 months, we'll know if he saw it coming.